Yo, what's up, Jason? Thank you so much for being here on the Fandid Artistpreneur podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Trav. Thanks for having me. Very honored to be here.
Oh man, the honor and pleasure is all mine and ours. You guys, Jason is not only an incredible friend, but he's one of the most inspirational people to me. You know, we've also known each other for a long time, and a lot of people are surprised to know that we've known each other for so long. But the history runs deep, and man, I'm just
Yep.
like I've said already, your story has been such a huge inspiration to me, especially to see, you really, I wouldn't say evolve. I'm sure you had all this like in your head, at least I think that you had all these plans in your head. But man,
I definitely did not.
I would love to hear, from you, kind of where did you start? Where did everything kind of get started? And when did like entertainment when did the bug bite you first?
As you know, it's been a long journey, and one thing that's been awesome is just getting to meet incredible people like you,
Mm-hmm.
Travis, along the way. I think it's very fortuitous because like so much of my beginning, I think, came with your beginning to some degree. Um, but yeah, so I'm Jason Wiley. I'm the founder of Jubilee Media. We're now a media company that's all about empathy, provoking understanding, creating human connection. But my start was pretty unusual, I would say. This was not part of the plan. I never thought I would be in media. I never thought I'd be in entertainment. I never even thought I'd be a founder.
Wow.
I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Kansas. I went to school studying business, finance, and management, but I had a very clear trajectory as to what my life would be, and it was like all according to a very, very, very well-worn path. That's like go to a good school, get a good job that's very, very stable, make a decent amount of money so that you can get married and have a family, retire. And that's what happiness looks like, especially because my parents, they're immigrants, and they had a very much like this stability, happiness mentality. And all of that was going according to plan. I went to Penn, I graduated, I was at Bain, working in New York City, making a six-figure salary, which to me and to my family at that time was like unheard of,
Made
right?
it.
It took my family like decades to get to that
Wow.
level. And suddenly I was making it as my first job. And all of that changed when I made my very first YouTube video. And a lot of folks have heard this, but my 22nd birthday happened to coincide with the Haiti earthquake. I made my very first video on YouTube to raise money for Haiti. Um, and that video ended up getting maybe 10,000 views, raised tens of thousands of dollars for Haiti. And that was kind of my start to like really, you know, turn on that light bulb. But it was in the course of that that I think we met, and that our paths
What
crossed.
year was
So
that? Do you
we
remember at
definitely
all?
should tell that story as well. My first video was 2010, so I think the video that we did together was probably 2011 or 2012. That'd be my
Right,
guess.
right. Good old love language.
Is this time for the booty
I
hole?
think it might be. Actually, before we jump into that, let me ask you what was because I guess I've never heard this before, but what made you decide to major in business and management? Was that always something that you grew up with, like thinking about and like wanting to jump into, or was it something else?
No, quite honestly, I had no idea what that even meant. When I was applying to colleges, Eddie, my older brother Edward went to Harvard, which was awesome,
Yeah.
but also
Which
like
we visited once and hung out.
rose the, yeah, crazy, right? And again, my family didn't expect for him to get into Harvard, but when he did, it was like, oh, okay, so Jason should go to Harvard or Jason should go to Yale too. Like that just changed the entire paradigm.
Wow.
So for me, I was like, okay, I just have to apply to the very best schools and see where I want to go. And again, with Eddie, we didn't expect him to get in, but he did. For me, then suddenly the expectation was that I was going to get into all these schools, and I didn't. I didn't get to Harvard, I didn't get to Yale, and one of the few Ivy League schools I got into was Penn. But I had happened to apply for Wharton because my brother was like, hey, their business school is like the best undergrad business school in the country. I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I like business, I think. I don't know what that means. So I just happened to apply and I got in, and that's kind of like inadvertently started me on that path.
Wow.
Looking back, I think it makes so much sense to me. But moving forward at that time, I wasn't asking myself like really critical questions like who am I? What is it
Mm,
that I want to do? Or what is it that I want to be? I just was very much living according to a plan that had been built out for me. So
wow.
that's kind of a long answer, but Unlike a lot of this young generation, I just was like blinders. Okay, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do.
That's such a great point because I think just generally, generationally, there's right now there's a whole sentiment that a lot of people don't necessarily want to take the college route, which makes a lot of sense,
Mm,
and because a lot of people are finding creativity as the thing they're jumping into now, and so I love the sentiment of like the whole conversation, but I think it's really interesting that you said that it was because Eddie, got into Harvard and the expectation wasn't necessarily that he wasn't going to, but it came as a surprise, then kind of became the believability to your parents of like, oh, our kids can do anything, like Jason, go for it type of thing. Is that true?
yeah, absolutely. It's remarkable how many different things in my life are a result of seeing someone next to me do something incredible or unbelievable or otherworldly and saying not like I'm better than this person, but wait a second, if Travis can do this, if Eddie can do this, if Arash can do this, why can't I?
Mm,
Right? The story I like to tell folks is I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but in high school my mom she was a professor of computer science. So she was like, "Hey, computers are the future." I was like, "Oh, cool.
wow.
I don't know what that means." She goes, "You should learn how to code." I go, "I don't, why?" She goes, "Everyone should learn how to code. That's going to be part of the future." I go, "Okay, so are you going to teach me?" She goes, "No, I'm not going to teach you. Let's find someone to like teach you." I was like, "Okay." And my brother's friend at the time, Arash, he was a really like great coder. So once a week he would come over to my house and he would like teach me how to build like an HTML website, and like I had like GIFs and I had like Flash going
No
on.
way.
I don't think I was very talented as a coder in general, but that's something that I enjoyed.
Did you use it for your MySpace top eight?
Arash ended up going to, yeah, exactly, just like to specialize the colors. My Zanga was popping,
Yo, yeah, I bet your Zanga
great
was popping, bro.
fonts. Exactly, exactly. Arash ended up going to MIT, obviously a great
Wow.
school, brilliant. And when he was a junior, he started his own company. It was called something like Fish Guppy or something. It was about like textbook sharing. It totally flopped. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then around senior year, I remember hearing that he was contemplating leaving MIT or dropping out. And to me, I was like, that's insane. You
Wow.
got like 6 months left. Why would you leave before getting your
It's so
degree?
hard to get in there.
So, right. So Eddie, like everyone's like, don't leave. You should just stay. Just like stick it out. Follow the path. Right. He drops out of MIT. No joke. 6 months later, we get a beta email for beta tests. Welcome to the Dropbox.
No way.
Arash ended up becoming one of the co-founders of Dropbox, and now that obviously they're a billion-dollar company and incredibly successful. And I share that story all only to say like Arash was super smart, he's super hardworking, he's brilliant. But when you see individuals in your life who you're like, wait a second, I was on the same chess team as him, I was on the same debate team as him. He taught me how to code. Why can't I build things of that scale? Why can't I make that kind of difference?
Mm,
Why not us?
wow.
Right? So I like to say that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. It doesn't mean that we're special. It means that if we dream big enough, we're actually capable of doing it.
Come on. Sorry, bro. I think that like
Let's go.
so
Let's
let's
go.
go. I mean, so much of that I think what we're seeing with, how distribution and marketing has changed drastically because now everybody has a portal, right, with them that can to the rest of the world or at least to be able to tap into the conversations of the world. I mean, it truly is like it seems like this generation, all of us are starting to really see that because people are living out their lives in, IRL. I mean, maybe kind of, but like they are showing the world their daily lives and giving us a propensity to believe in ourselves, right? Like that person looks like me. That person, maybe come from a similar town as me. Or the struggle was the same. Like, why can't I? Man, I think that was one of my favorite things about coming to LA when I moved from Seattle was nothing. Seattle's always gonna be my home, and like that's where my tribe and where I grew up. But coming out here and being able to be around people like yourself, bro, that like we're all really trying our best to make this dream come true and that kind of kinship of community, and especially when you're around those people with the same like-minded, dreams and goals, and it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. Man, that can fire, that
Mm,
can create like a revolution, and I feel like we're seeing that right now through work, through art, through school, through community.
I absolutely agree. I really feel like LA is a hub for dreamers. And it's important to know, kind of like what you're saying, success and dreams don't always look the same for every person, right? So for Arash or for us, it might be about starting a company that's going to be at a certain scale. For someone else, it's about like getting their big break as an actor or a dancer or as an entertainer, singer. For someone else, it might actually just be about community and like building a beautiful family. And that's where I want to be really clear about. It's not a one size fits all. So when I say I have to get off of my very well worn path, that actually might be the right path for someone else.
Mm.
So there's not a better or a worse. It's about asking ourselves that question of why am I here on this earth? I believe that everyone has a purpose. Everyone is here for a reason. If we're able to tap in and figure out who it is that we're supposed to be, why we're here, and how we can use that to serve others, I think that's like where we're hitting our sweet spot. Like our, I forget what that is in Japanese. There's like all the concentric circles, and it's like that, you know,
It's not ikigai, is it?
the center of that. It is ikigai.
Ikigai.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a
Ikigai.
great, yeah. If you haven't read that book, please go read that book. Man, it's funny. There's another book, actually, a Japanese book called The Courage to Be Disliked, and I don't know if you've
Hmm.
read that, but they talk about
How's that?
it's written in a good way. It's really cool, but like the whole crux of it is utilizing Adlerian psychology and kind of Greek mythology, or just like the philosophers back in the day, kind of fusing those two to really help people understand like why we're here. And the thing that I like about it a lot is that they in the book define happiness as contribution, and they talk about something called community feeling from that contribution. And I've been trying this out in my own life,
Hmm.
and I'm realizing that we're happiest. Like, well, the book says happiness is contributing to community and feeling like your contribution matters. And it doesn't have to necessarily be to a specific community, like, but overall to the world, to nature, to this world that we're in. And one of the things that blew my mind about it was saying we can be lonely in a crowd of people, and we could feel never lonely being alone. What matters is our contribution to society. And I feel like, I don't know, maybe this is a good segue
Wow.
in into Jubilee. I mean, for like before the name changed. I mean, I'm OG. I'm an OG fan, but I would love to hear kind of seeing all that and knowing that your desire. I mean, what I've known about you, Jason, is that you give. You're such a giver. Um, how did all of that, like the fruit of your labor when it came to school and seeing like a rash and all these things, how did it kind of culminate into you shooting your shot with Jubilee?
Man, that's such a good question. I think that when I was young, my parents, most kids during the summer would like play Little League baseball or they would like go on summer trips, right? My family wouldn't do that. My family every summer, my mom would drop me and my brother off at the local public library every day. Um, and she would say, "Hey, I'll pick you up in about 8 to 10 hours." And what we were expected to do was volunteer every day.
Wow.
And it was this idea, yeah, I think part of it was like free daycare to some degree. We started maybe at like middle school, so free like babysitting.
Yeah, your mom's so smart.
But there
That's
was
clutch.
always from a, yeah, yeah, honestly, and there was those librarians, they were such sweethearts. They were so kind to us, but it was so boring.
Oh,
It was the most boring thing because, every day what you would do is you would go in, you would catalog all the books, and then you would like put all the books back onto the shelf, and then like undoubtedly like 3 hours later, there's another set of books that you have to go and like. So literally, the way I would get out of doing the work was I would try to find a book to read and like hide in the corner of the library to read.
wow.
Do you know
I
what I
love
mean? It's
that.
like that was like, oh man, I'm being like mischievous. I'm gonna go read a book instead of putting these books away.
Which is what like every,
Um,
parent hopes their kid does, ironically, right?
yeah, somehow this is like now like parents are like, ooh, good idea. Leave my toddler at the library. No, I share all to say that from a very young age, for some reason, my parents always had this very strong belief in community and community service. We had a greater faith around like being part of the church community and
Right.
something about like, hey, we are not here just on our own. We're here to serve others. So I think I always had that in the back of my brain somewhere, and it just like wasn't fully ignited until I had some of these opportunities later on. And I was looking for it in my workplace too. Like I had spent time in Africa working for the Clinton Foundation, for example.
I remember
I thought
that.
I might want to just do like, nonprofit NGO work. I had spent time with my brother on the Obama campaign in 2017, like the primaries, right? When he was going up against Hillary. I had spent time like exploring in different ways. I was in Shanghai working for a social enterprise. I was doing all these other things, and I was just trying to find the way that this would show up. And it just so happened that it was going to show up in the media space. Um, so I don't know how this happened and how I ended up here, but like when I look back, all those pieces make sense. But I think along the way, I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, why did I just spend time, in Africa? Like, that's not what I want to do now. Why did I spend time on this election? It was really exciting, but also like I'm a little more disillusioned around politics. That's not what I want to do. And when I'm looking back now, it's like, oh, that wasn't a waste of time. It was actually really necessary for me to figure out that that wasn't it either, right? So
Man,
that whole like Thomas Edison, like you need to like make 1,000 faulty light bulbs to figure out your light bulb. I think that's like that was very much necessary for me.
dude, so much of that I didn't even know. I've known you for over 10
Mm,
years, bro. And like, I love that. There's a mantra that I try to live by of like, we can't, in order to find what we want to do, we have to find what we don't want to do. And maybe that's just me and my
mm,
Aquarius self being lazy,
yes.
but but it sounds like you never gave up that discovery though. And sometimes, when we're young and or just not even when we're young, just any time in life we can get discouraged when we find things that we don't like. I try to see it as like a filtration system, right? Like maybe there's a reason, right, that this just isn't something that maybe it works for a lot of people, and a lot of people, and because sometimes as artists I try to justify, well, I need to make a pop song like the chain smokers, and make myself feel
Mm.
bad because for some reason I don't want to do that, but then I feel like I should. And I think that just so much of that can harbor, a lot of our insecurities. It can really harbor, what's that saying where we're trying to be someone we're not, imposter syndrome,
Imposter
right?
syndrome,
And we
yeah.
kind of make ourselves feel bad. But I love that you were just relentless in going after it and just trying to figure out, even though it was still fuzzy, right? Even though you still had no idea where it was going to lead you. Did you have just faith and courage of like, you know what, I'm getting there?
No, not really. It didn't feel like I was making any progress. It felt like I was just kind of like fumbling through it. You know, uh, Fast forwarding a little bit, there was a time between Jubilee Project and Jubilee Media, right? Like I had started Jubilee Project as a nonprofit with Eric, one of my best friends, with Eddie, my brother, and there's a stage at which they left the nonprofit and I was by myself. And even on the outside, it was looking really good, right? It was like, hey, you just hit 200,000 subscribers. We had one of our biggest viral videos. It was like 24 million views,
Wow.
something insane. So people were like, congratulations, congratulations. Meanwhile, Eddie and Eric had both kind of decided to go and do their own separate thing. So
Wow.
internally, I just felt like a complete failure. And it was probably one of the darkest moments of my life because I felt like I was like the last person on a sinking ship. I didn't know
Wow.
what my purpose was. I didn't know why I was doing it anymore. I felt very untethered. And looking back, even though that was one of the lowest points of my life, it was also where I'm so grateful for that moment because it was during that time I really had to peel back the curtain again and say, okay, I'm no longer with these other two guys. It's just me.
Just
If it's
you.
just me, who am I? I'm enough just alone, but what is it that I want to do now? If I wasn't afraid, who is it that I would be? What is it that I would want to do? And I had to kind of rebuild this entire vision for what ended up becoming Jubilee Media.
Wow.
Um, but I think that I call it the watermelon season.
Hmm.
But that kind of like time of intense pressure. Have I shared about the watermelon?
No,
I feel like
please
I've shared this
enlighten
before.
us.
I call it the watermelon season because if you talk to any watermelon farmer, they'll tell you that like the best way to grow watermelons and have them bear more fruit or create more seeds is you actually have to take the watermelon out of the sun. You have to like deprive it of water and of nutrients, and then and only then does the watermelon start to bear more fruit,
Wait, what? You have to take it
right?
out of its natural habitat?
Yeah, the watermelon almost starts to feel like it's dying, and therefore it starts to bear more fruit. And I think about that as a metaphor for us. I'm like, I wouldn't wish what I went through or what we go through on anyone, But when I look back, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be where I am today. So when people kind of reach out to me and saying like, I'm struggling, this sucks, like I feel depressed, I don't know where up from down is, left from right, I say, I totally hear you. I totally understand that. But what I know, I don't tell them like, hey, everything's gonna be okay, because that's not always the right thing to say. But I know that a lot of times those folks are going through their watermelon season. And when they look back, that there might be a reason why they went through that.
Right,
So
dude. Wow.
that's something that I kind of like remember from a lot of perspective for myself.
First of all, thank you for that analogy. I love these. I love analogies like that. There's. I think there's like good pumpkin analogies too that I've read before as well. But the watermelon, I did not
I'm
know.
sure we could find
Right,
one.
I did not know that it was like the watermelon almost had to die because it. I think that like as artists, as entrepreneurs, it's easy, especially if we're younger and a little bit, unjaded or naive. It's easy to think that things will just last forever. But ever since we started
Mm,
Fandid, you've been able to mentor me a lot, and just from seeing like your activity and what you work on too, like businesses are almost like, and artists are almost like it's not that we're always dying, but it's that like it can always be fleeting, right? And we need to always like put pedal to the metal and really focus in on what it is. But like I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm starting to realize that business and it is a lot like life, where it's like we're here for a certain amount of time. And we just have a chance to make it the best as possible. And nothing lasts forever, but the good that we can do within that time of it lasting can speak volumes into eternity and can really help reduce
mm.
suffering for people in enormous ways. Pretty much saying like we're not going to be here forever, and maybe that's the whole purpose. We're not supposed to be, but perhaps there's something we can do to really, create goodness that perpetuates with the time that we have while our business is in session.
Yeah, yeah. And often, even if it's not super clear, that time that you're spending doing a certain thing or building something is teaching you how to build, right? Like those are skills that are transferable and that you will continue to learn, use in the future, whether it's with this business venture or the next. Um, so that's where, like, especially when there's like so many young people who come up to me and they're like, "Oh man, I just feel like I'm wasting my time. Like I don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and or I feel like I'm too late." I just feel like, man, we have to remember that we're running a marathon. Like
Yes.
we are not running the 100-meter dash, right?
Right.
So I think that's good perspective.
Man, if you could bring us like towards, back to that crux, right? The going
Mm.
from a nonprofit to a business. Could you maybe explain, I mean, share what you can, like what was that transition like, and what was kind of, I guess, the North Star for you that gave you the propensity to kind of go after and transition it from a nonprofit to, a different type of business?
Yeah. I had first actually created Jubilee Project as a nonprofit because I had this kind of false belief in my head that you had to be a nonprofit to do good. And that's just not true, right?
Right.
But at the time, that was like every model that I had seen was like that. Like someone who I had worked with at Bain, his name is Adam Braun. He had started a nonprofit called Pencils of
Mm.
Promise. It was about like creating schools all around the
Wow.
country and the world. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. That was a 501(c)(3). I saw so many different examples of that. I was like, oh, I guess if I want to do good in the world, it should be as a 501(c)(3). And it was great because as Jubilee Project, we raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for other causes and other organizations. And I think we did a lot of good.
Yeah.
But then I also felt like, man, why is it so hard? And why do I have to raise money for this organization? And I just realized it wasn't fitting like my paradigm of how I wanted to operate.
Mm.
And when I cleared the slate and I said, okay, what is it that I want to do? Suddenly, talk about full circle. Suddenly I was, and it sounds so obvious, but it's like, wait a second, I went to business school, right? Like I studied entrepreneurship was a class I went to. And at the
Wow.
time it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be this entrepreneur. I was like, oh, this is like an easy class to take.
Right. Wow.
I had met a lot of entrepreneurs along the way at Bain, at Wharton, at my high school, even through Arash. And all the kind of stars aligned. I was like, oh, actually, I think that if I were to do this again, it would be to make the biggest possible impact possible on the biggest scale. And I actually think the best way to do that is a for-profit company.
Mm.
A for-profit company, not as Jubilee Project was a lot more focused on Asian American issues, And I'm very, very proud to be API, but I was like, you know what, Jubilee Media, the audience and the vision will be much larger than that. There was also a faith component to Jubilee Project, which I said, you know what, I don't want to just be preaching to the choir. I
Mm.
want to like speak to all people.
All people.
So it was a lot of just like paradigm shifting, like what area do I want to play in? But the great news was that Jubilee Project had prepared me really well for the kind of content I was going to make. Because making nonprofit content is like so difficult.
I mean, it's what
It's
working with
like,
no
hey,
budget, right?
no, don't only, yeah, no budget, make a viral video that causes people to open up their wallets and give to a cause, and make it, really entertaining. And you have to compete against PewDiePie and every other viral video.
Right.
It's like, wow, that's actually quite difficult.
If I can interject real quick,
So,
like for everybody
yeah.
listening out there, like it, the reason why it costs so much to make content, or at least like professional content, right, is there's so many pieces, and it's really difficult to do. Obviously, with YouTube and with people getting better at like mobile skills, and mirrorless cameras looking incredible now, and the technology getting better, it's definitely gotten cheaper. But I just wanted to say that, like, in order to operate, especially at that time, at the scale that Jason was wanting to, using a couple, Canon 5Ds are great, but like it's expensive, and it takes a tribe.
Yeah, yeah, it did. And we were really fortunate that we had a lot of volunteers and people who wanted to support. So that was the way that we were able to scale at the early stage.
Man, so then when I guess when did you officially jump into really developing Jubilee to what it is now?
Yeah, so the guys probably left around 2015. I didn't end up launching Jubilee Media until 2017. So it was about a year and a half there of like just like toiling in the dark, figuring my shit out. The first step in that process was actually raising capital,
Mm.
raising funds as a startup, which when you first say that or you hear that idea, you're like, I have no idea what that means. What are you talking about? Like raising capital from who and how and why? And what I started to realize was, oh, actually, this is just the journey of like being able to articulate what your vision is and finding folks who are supportive along the way
Wow.
and who are willing to give you seed money or capital to grow your idea, right? So in a lot of ways, you become this kind of like salesman or like this vision creator. Um, so that was the first step, and then I started hiring people. And when you first start a new company, Jubilee Media was a new entity. The first people who join you are the crazy ones, right? Those
Yes.
are the ones who are just like the best because they're fearless, they have crazy ambitions. You're like, trust me, this is gonna become a thing. Because at the time, this was 2017, this was right after the election. So the world was more kind of divided than ever, right?
Right.
People like were like, I can't believe what happened. I can't believe, you know, Trump won. That's
Yeah.
and 50% of the country felt one way, 50% of the country felt another
Mm-hmm.
way. And here I am saying, hey, we're gonna make a media company that's all about empathy, about discourse. We're gonna feature both sides, and we're gonna have like really great conversations. And
Wow.
people are like, what do you mean? Why would anyone watch that?
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they'll be like, oh, I see. You want to be like positive content, like Upworthy.
Mm.
And we're like, no, no, no. That's like my mom's favorite channel, not for our
Right.
generation. So at the time, there wasn't that many groups that were trying to do things that we wanted to. And I didn't know what the video content was going to look like. I didn't even know what any of the shows were going to look like. But I was like, there is a huge space here of people who don't feel like they are aligned with either side, polarized, or even feel like they have a home for like empathy and being understood.
Wow.
Let's create that home for human connection. And I got, Travis, I got like over 100 no's first. And to be fair, like at least half of those no's were because I couldn't articulate my vision very well. But half of those no's were like, I just don't believe you.
Mm. I just don't
And then
believe you.
slowly I got my first yes, and then my next yes, right? Like we share some investors, like folks who are just like, hey, I believe in you. I want to give you my first check. And then slowly that kind of snowball starts rolling, and you're like, okay, awesome. I'm not crazy. I'm not stupid.
Yeah, I'm not crazy, right? I mean, I think as artists, especially, I mean, creators and artists, I feel like we're all kind of one and the same now because we have to do both. Artists have to create content now, and now we're all kind of being influencers within our own sectors and with our own things. I know that you're doing a lot on LinkedIn, especially. If you guys haven't seen that, you make sure you follow Jason as well. He provides a lot of great kind of coaching content as well. But the I guess the question is like, how, as an artist, we're always told we're crazy. We're always told, why are you spending so much time doing that? What were some of the things that helped you understand that this is the job, really, right? Like, it's almost like as an artist, you have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Was there any learnings? Like, the first book you gave me was, Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog, which,
Yeah.
everybody, please go read that, listen to it. I read it and listened to it multiple times already. But yeah, what kind of
Yes.
inspired you, like, to be okay with it, feeling like you're not okay?
I think it's a really good question. The way that you even said it is what I would start with, is that I don't know if you'll ever be at a position where you feel like 100% standing on solid ground, to be honest.
That's so comforting to hear, Jason.
There are days I wake up still as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you feel it, where I'm like, am I a good entrepreneur? Am I doing a good job? Like, this is really hard. What the heck is going on? Being an entrepreneur is like being on a boat, and early on, you're on the smallest freaking boat ever. You're like, imagine yourself on a little life raft. So every wave of every ocean, you can feel the full extent of
Oh,
it. So the lows are like so low, and the highs are so high. And one day to the next, you can go from the highest high to the lowest low and be like, I'm the greatest entrepreneur ever. We're going to be $1 billion company. And the next day, like, oh, I'm shit. We're going to go out of business tomorrow. And slowly, what happens is you start to grow a bigger boat.
wow.
Right. Like when you're like have more success, you like upgrade to now like a little dinghy, and then now you've got like a yacht, and then eventually you become a cruise ship, etc. And then each wave feels like a little bit less, more palatable, right? The highs are a little less high, but the lows are much less low.
Wow.
But what I always try to look for in great entrepreneurs that I kind of mentor or invest in is two things. I look for one, like a humility.
Humility.
Because yeah, you have to believe and you have to be like, I'm crazy. I totally believe that I can succeed, but you also have to have the humility to understand that you don't know all the answers. And part of the process is actually just figuring out the answers and learning. Like that's actually part of the skill set. It's not let me turn it on and do what I'm born to do. It's no, let me kind of like struggle along the way and learn and yeah, have a belief in myself, but recognize like I'm not quite there yet and I'm gonna have to grow in this journey. And the second thing I look for is grit, like persistence, this kind of like dogged belief that I can do it, that we can be shoe dogs, right? That we can be the Rashfordozis or the Bill Gates one day.
Mm.
And I feel like that kind of alchemy of those two ingredients are really important. The humility to understand that you're not always going to be right, but the grit to believe that you can be right.
Wow. Grit. Yeah. I mean, Jason, I see all of it. I mean, in you, it's just easy to see. If I can ask you, do you feel like it compounded to both of those lessons compounded over time as you were just building, like just continually building? Because it's easy, right? As an artist, we think sometimes I can't do those things, so therefore I won't. But weirdly, every time that I've ever worked on a record, it just starts as like it's just a series of steps, and the steps just keep getting better
Yeah.
and better because it's compounding. Do you feel? I mean, who was it? Was it Einstein that said that compound interest is like the seventh wonder of the world or something? But you know,
Yeah, no, I don't know who said that, but I believe that. And you're exactly right. It's any venture, whether it's like starting a company or creating an album or like becoming, X, Y, and Z. If you were to put me on the bottom of like Mount Everest and be like, get to the top, I'd be like, hell no, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. In the same way that 10 years ago, if you had put me in front of a camera and said, build a media company in 10 years that has whatever 8 million subscribers and 2 billion views, I'd be like, hell no, there's no way I can do that. I don't know how to do that.
wow,
Rather, if you put me at the bottom of Mount Everest and say, hey, do you see up here? It's like 20 feet. Let's take a walk up here.
wow,
Okay, I can do that. You walk up, you slip, you're like, wait a second, I've got no shoes. Like my feet are killing
Hmm.
me. You're like, oh, okay, I should probably get some shoes. Come back, you are able to traverse that, right? So
Wow.
slowly it becomes way more palatable as we like take it step by step. So I kind of rarely tell anyone to do like the big step. Like when people are like, hey, should I quit my job to become an entrepreneur? Should I quit my job to be an artist?
Right.
I say like, hey, have you done the 20-foot thing? Have you like gotten the right shoes? It doesn't mean buy the right equipment. It's like, have you actually tried to do some of the work while in your full-time
Right.
job? And you'll see along the way there are like things that you learn or signs of like, hey, this is going really well or this isn't. And those should guide you, right? It
Right.
shouldn't just be like a dog and let me just do the same thing over and over and over again.
Man, I think it's so key to like. I think of what I've been trying to do a lot more is listen. I've been trying to listen to more of like what the universe is trying to tell me or what like my body is trying to tell me,
Mm,
and I've been living kind of trying to live in this like just being here now, right? I've been saying this thing to some friends lately of like maybe the future is a curse, and I don't mean that in like a horrible way, but sometimes but when
whoa.
we're anxious, it feels that way, right? When we're anxious, we're
Mm,
projecting so much, so many bad things happening in the future, and it's maybe that's why the present is the only thing we have because we can't exist in 5 dimensions. I don't think we have the
hmm,
capability to. Um, and the thing that's been helping me at least, especially through this whole entrepreneurial journey, has been learning from people like you, bro. But especially being in, just focusing on what it is like here. Um, and as somebody that definitely struggles with anxiety and working with my therapist, um, she's been helping me just to try to understand that this is the only thing that we have, and maybe just maybe we might be tripping ourselves up with so many goals and things that we have to hit. One thing that she told me was the
mm,
outcome is not your responsibility. The input
mm.
is, but the outcome where it lands, like what you had said, you said, I didn't know that we would get to this many views. Weirdly, I feel like if you had started that way and said, we have to get to 2 billion views, weirdly, it probably wouldn't have happened.
And I probably wouldn't have started, to be honest. It would have felt too daunting.
It would have felt too daunting. Man, Jason, we got to wrap up soon, but if I can ask you a couple more questions, man, and would love to have you again,
Yeah,
man. Maybe do a volume two, get more.
this is fun. Yeah, love chopping it up. So for sure.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate you. If so, two last questions. One, what is it about Fandid that makes you, believe, and especially with your industry and where you're at? And then I guess I'll wait for the last question.
Yeah, I mean, so many things. For Fandid, first off, just you as an entrepreneur, I think the two things I mentioned around the humility to be learning, but also the grit to persevere. I think you exhibit both of those things in spades. So I'm so excited to see you on your journey and to support you in that way.
Thank you so much, brother.
But separately, I also just love the philosophy of Fandid, right? Like what you're trying to do is you're trying to democratize the industry so that you can empower people to have more ownership, but also allow other people on their journey.
Mm,
Like, just if that were the future of art and projects and media, that would be beautiful,
mm,
right? And why shouldn't it look like that? I think the vision is really, really big
mm,
as to what could happen with Fandit and where it should go. And I think unless it was that big, I wouldn't be excited to support it because it wouldn't be worth it. So I think that the challenge is really big, but I think that the opportunity is really big. But that's what kind of really draws me to it. And that's why I'm really proud to be, advisor, but also just like support you as a
dude,
friend.
man, it means the world. I mean, especially from someone who's lived that, right? Like we've got other friends too that we kind of came up with, like AJ Raphael, and like Wes of Wong Fu, and it's like because we know what it was before, all this like digital media, and then we live through it, and not post, but like just within these ebbs and flows, it really is amazing to have people around you that don't ever ask you necessarily why, but they ask like how, and like how can I help, like how can I
Mm,
be a part, and that's kind of our thesis of why we're going for, we believe fans investing versus just donating.
mm,
If you can just touch on real
mm-hmm.
quick, and maybe this is actually I have one more question after this, but if you could touch on real quick, in your experience from going up from a nonprofit to a for-profit, why to you is it better, or is investing a better proponent for bringing people together, or
Yeah, it's a great question. If you think about investing, it's historically always been a huge cause for inequity, right? It's only the people with money, with power, with the means who are able to invest. And therefore, like often, whether it's the income gap or classism, like all that has increased because of that. And it doesn't mean that folks without money should be investing, but when we're able to create like a democratized platform that allows other people to invest in things that they really care about, they really believe in, they want to help to build,
Mhm.
I think it's a really amazing opportunity, right? Like, not every individual is going to be able to invest in the next startup or the next Google or Facebook. But imagine if you can invest and play a small part in your favorite artist's first or next album. And you don't only just get to enjoy it because you would have bought it and you would have donated anyways, but you actually get to be a part of the journey and you get rewarded a little bit for that success. Like, I think that's such a beautiful idea and it represents this greater idea. You know, the word Jubilee in the Bible, it comes from the year where like debts are forgiven and people who had been wrongfully imprisoned are set free and like land was given back to the people. It's all about democratization actually. And it's a year of celebration. And I think Fandid represents that celebration of, you know, like we're like really giving power to the people in a lot of ways. So I'm really excited about that.